The oil sitting in your kitchen cabinet right now might be doing more to your heart, your brain, and your arteries than any pill your doctor has ever prescribed you. And most people over 60 have no idea which one they're actually using. Here's the thing. Nobody really sits you down and explains. For decades we were told to fear butter, fear bacon fat, fear anything that came from an animal. So an entire generation switched to vegetable oils, corn oils, sunflower oils, thinking they were doing the responsible thing, the healthy thing, and in some ways that switch made sense at the time. But nutrition science doesn't stand still. And what researchers understand today about fats, inflammation, and aging bodies looks different than it did 40 years ago. Before we go further, one honest thing needs to be said clearly. This video is for education. It is not medical advice, and it never will be. If you take medication, if you manage a health condition, or if you're simply not sure how a change in diet might affect you, please talk to your own doctor before changing anything in your routine. We're not here to replace that conversation. We're here to help you walk into it more informed. Now, back to the oil in your cabinet. Here's what tends to surprise people the most. It's not just about which oil you buy, it's about how you use it, how hot you cook it, and how often it shows up on your plate. Two people can buy the exact same bottle of oil and end up with completely different outcomes for their health, just based on habits most of us never think twice about. Over the next several minutes, we're going to walk through what current nutrition research actually says about the oils sitting on grocery store shelves right now. Which ones tend to support your heart? Which ones are associated with more inflammation when used heavily over the years? And which ones simply don't deserve the reputation they've built for themselves? This isn't about fear. It's about understanding what's actually happening in your kitchen, so you can make small, steady choices that add up over time. Because after 60, small choices compound. Your blood vessels, your joints, your brain, they've all had decades of whatever you've been cooking with. That's not something to panic about. It's something worth paying attention to. Let's start with the oil that keeps showing up again and again in the research on aging populations who tend to stay healthier longer. Let's start with olive oil, because it comes up in almost every serious study on aging populations who tend to stay healthier for longer. Extra virgin olive oil is made up of roughly 74% monounsaturated fat. That number matters more than it sounds. Monounsaturated fats are the type of fat associated with lower LDL cholesterol, the kind doctors often call the bad cholesterol, and with better overall blood vessel function. Extra virgin olive oil also carries natural antioxidants called polyphenols, along with vitamin E, both of which researchers connect to lower oxidative stress in the body. This is the oil at the center of what's often called the Mediterranean way of eating, a pattern researchers have studied for decades in populations that show lower rates of heart disease and longer average lifespans. Nobody is claiming olive oil alone explains that. Diet, movement, sleep, community, all of it plays a role. But olive oil keeps showing up as one consistent piece of that picture. Here's something practical, though, that a lot of people over 60 don't realize. Not all olive oil on the shelf is equal. Extra virgin means the oil was extracted without heavy chemical processing, which helps it keep more of those antioxidants intact. Regular or light olive oil often goes through more refining, which strips away some of those benefits. If you're going to invest in one healthier oil for your kitchen, the label matters. There's also the question of heat. Extra virgin olive oil has a moderate smoke point, somewhere in the range most home cooking doesn't exceed for everyday sautéing. It's not the best choice for very high heat searing, but it's excellent for roasting vegetables, finishing a dish, or using cold in a salad dressing, where you get the full benefit of those antioxidants without breaking them down. Now let's talk about a close relative in the good oil conversation: avocado oil. Avocado oil is also high in monounsaturated fat, similar in profile to olive oil, but with one practical advantage. It has a much higher smoke point, which means it holds up better under high heat cooking, things like searing a piece of fish, or stir-frying vegetables at high temperature. Research associates avocado oil with supporting heart health, and it also contains antioxidant compounds. If your cooking style involves a lot of high heat searing, avocado oil often makes more practical sense than olive oil for that specific job. Here's a distinction worth remembering, because it will help you shop smarter the next time you're standing in that aisle full of bottles, all making big promises. Fats generally fall into three broad categories. Monounsaturated fats, the kind found in olive oil and avocado oil, tend to be associated with lower LDL cholesterol and reduced inflammation markers in research. Polyunsaturated fats, which include omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, are essential, meaning your body needs them and can't produce them on its own. But here's the part almost nobody explains clearly. It's not just about having omega-6 or omega-3 in your diet. It's about the balance between the two. Modern diets, especially diets built around heavily processed vegetable oils like corn oil, soybean oil, and conventional sunflower oil, tend to be very high in omega-6 and comparatively low in omega-3. Some nutrition researchers associate that imbalance with a diet that leans more inflammatory overall, since omega-6 and omega-3 tend to have somewhat opposing roles in regulating inflammation in the body. This is a debated and evolving area of nutrition science, not a settled verdict, and researchers don't all agree on exactly how much this ratio matters for any one individual. But it's worth knowing the conversation exists, especially if inflammation, joint pain, or cardiovascular health are already part of your picture after 60. Before we go further, I want to pause here for a second, because this next part matters if you want to keep getting information like this. If any of this is landing for you, take a second and subscribe to this channel. And if you've already learned something new in the last few minutes, drop a comment below with the one oil you didn't expect to hear about. A like helps this reach someone else who needs it too. Now, let's get into the oil that causes the most confusion of all. The one sitting in almost every fried food, every packaged snack, every restaurant deep fryer in the country. Refined vegetable oils, sometimes just labeled vegetable oil on the bottle, are usually a blend of oils like corn, soybean, and sometimes cottonseed. They're heavily processed. The third category, saturated fat, is the one most of us grew up being told to avoid entirely. Found in coconut oil, palm oil, and animal fats like butter. The American Heart Association currently recommends keeping saturated fat intake under roughly 6% of your total daily calories. That's a general population guideline, not a personalized number. And again, this is exactly the kind of thing worth reviewing with your own doctor, especially if you already manage cholesterol with medication. These oils are also chemically less stable because of their polyunsaturated fat content. When exposed to heat, light, or air over time, they can break down and oxidize more easily than monounsaturated fats do. Oxidized fats are one of the things researchers associate with an inflammatory response in the body. That doesn't mean a single meal cooked in vegetable oil is doing damage. It means the pattern, the years of daily use at high heat, reheated, reused, is where the concern tends to build. Here's a practical example that shows up in almost every kitchen. Deep frying at a restaurant or even at home often reuses the same oil multiple times, sometimes across several days. Each time that oil is heated past its smoke point, it breaks down a little more and compounds form that weren't there in the fresh oil. This is exactly the kind of thing a lot of people never think about, because the oil looks the same in the fryer on day 1 and day 5. But the chemistry inside that bottle isn't the same at all. Butter, without clarifying it, actually has a fairly low smoke point and burns quickly. Once an oil passes its smoke point, it's not just about the taste turning bitter or acrid. It's about the oil literally changing at a molecular level, producing compounds that most nutrition researchers agree aren't something you want accumulating in your diet. So here's a simple habit that costs nothing and takes no extra time. Match the oil to the job. Save extra virgin olive oil for roasting, finishing, and salad dressings, where the heat stays moderate. Use avocado oil or refined oils with a higher smoke point when you're truly searing at high heat. And if a pan starts smoking heavily, that's usually the oil telling you it's already past the point where it's doing you any favors. This 3-job approach tends to be far more sustainable than trying to find one single perfect oil to use for everything, because honestly, no single oil is built to do every job well. The oil that's best for a delicate salad dressing is rarely the best oil for searing a steak at high heat, and vice versa. There's one more myth worth clearing up directly, because it changes how a lot of people cook without realizing it. You may have heard that olive oil is unsafe or unhealthy to cook with at any heat. That's an oversimplification. Extra virgin olive oil does have a lower smoke point than something like avocado oil or refined peanut oil, generally in a range suitable for most everyday sautéing and roasting. Studies that have actually heated olive oil to typical home cooking temperatures have found it holds up reasonably well and doesn't break down as quickly as some assume, largely thanks to those same antioxidants we mentioned earlier. So cooking with olive oil at moderate heat is not the mistake some people believe it to be. It's really about matching the heat level to the specific oil. Cooking sprays deserve a quick mention too, since they're a staple in a lot of kitchens focused on portion control. Many cooking sprays are made from oils like canola or soybean, combined with a propellant, and used in a very thin layer. Used occasionally for a quick coat on a pan, they're a reasonable convenience. Where they can be misleading is in how fat-free they often appear on nutrition labels, simply because the serving size is defined as such a tiny spray that it rounds down to 0. There's also a storage side to this that almost nobody talks about, but it matters just as much as which oil you buy in the first place. Light, heat, and air are the 3 things that speed up an oil going rancid. That's why the healthiest oil in the store can lose a lot of its benefits sitting in a clear glass bottle right next to a sunny kitchen window for months. A dark bottle, stored in a cool cabinet away from the stove, holds up far better over time than a clear bottle sitting out on the counter for convenience. If you've ever noticed an oil that smells slightly like crayons or old paint, that's rancidity, a practical habit worth adopting. Buy oils in smaller bottles rather than large ones if you don't go through them quickly. Smaller bottles, used up within a few months, tend to preserve more of what you're actually paying for. Cooking habits, more than almost anything else in a daily routine, tend to run on autopilot. Most people don't consciously choose their cooking oil every single day. They just reach for whatever's already sitting closest to the stove. But it also means that once a habit like this gets set, it tends to stay exactly the same for years, sometimes decades, without ever being reconsidered. The first step isn't throwing anything out. It's simply noticing. The next time you cook, take a look at the bottle you're reaching for. Check whether it says extra virgin, refined, or a vegetable oil blend. That single moment of noticing is often the first shift. The second step is what nutrition professionals sometimes call substitution rather than elimination. If your morning eggs are cooked in the same vegetable oil you've used for a decade, that's a low-stakes place to try avocado oil or a high oleic option instead. The third step is paying attention to heat. Even the best oil in the world used the wrong way, past its smoke point day after day, adds up. A slightly lower flame protects the oil's structure and over time protects you too. The fourth step is reading beyond the front of the label. Natural, light, and pure are marketing words, not nutrition facts. Extra virgin, cold-pressed, high oleic, and the actual fat breakdown tell you far more than the front of the bottle ever will. It's worth touching on eating out too, since most of us aren't cooking every single meal at home. Restaurants and fast food places overwhelmingly use whatever oil is cheapest and most stable for high-volume frying, which usually means heavily processed vegetable oil blends, often reused multiple times throughout a shift. That's simply the reality of commercial kitchens, and it's not realistic to expect every restaurant to switch to extra virgin olive oil for deep frying. This isn't a reason to avoid eating out altogether. It's more reason to make sure the meals you do control, the ones cooked in your own kitchen, lean toward the choices we've talked about today, so the overall pattern across a week balances out. Now, should any of this information raise specific questions about your own health, and it likely has, here is a direct way to bring it up at your next appointment, rather than trying to figure it out alone. You might say something like, I have been looking into the type of cooking oil I use, and I am wondering if switching more toward olive or avocado oil and cutting back on processed vegetable oil makes sense given my current cholesterol numbers or medications. That kind of specific and direct question usually gets a much more useful answer than a general one, and it opens the door for your doctor to factor in anything specific to your own history, your medications, and your blood work. So none of this requires total perfection. No one needs to eat like a nutrition textbook every single day of their life. What tends to matter most, based on the research we have walked through together, is the pattern over months and years. Before we move on, there's one category of fat that deserves to be singled out clearly because, unlike almost everything else we've discussed today, this one isn't debated among researchers at all. Partially hydrogenated oils, the source of what's commonly known as artificial trans fat, were once everywhere in margarine, packaged baked goods, coffee creamers, and fried fast food. Trans fats behave differently in the body than any other type of fat we've talked about today. Research consistently associated them with raising LDL cholesterol while also lowering HDL cholesterol, the good kind, at the same time, a combination that made them particularly harmful for heart health. When it comes to your health after 60, one honest concern worth addressing directly is the cost of these premium oils. But because these oils are typically used in smaller amounts, drizzled rather than poured, a single bottle often lasts longer than people expect. Buying a mid-range extra virgin olive oil, rather than the most expensive option on the shelf, still gets you most of the benefit we've discussed today, since the core monounsaturated fat content don't differ dramatically between a moderately priced and a premium bottle. This isn't about needing to buy the most expensive product in the store, it's about choosing the right category of oil, and that choice is available at nearly every price point. Now let's talk about blood sugar for a moment too, since so many people over 60 are managing it, whether that's prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, or simply keeping an eye on things as a precaution. Fat itself doesn't raise blood sugar the way carbohydrates do, but the type of fat in a meal can influence how your body responds to the carbohydrates sitting next to it on the plate. Some research has looked at meals higher in monounsaturated fat, the kind found in olive oil and avocado oil, and found associations with steadier post-meal blood sugar responses compared to meals built around heavily processed oils. This is genuinely an area of ongoing research, and it's not a substitute for the specific guidance a doctor or a registered dietitian would give someone managing diabetes directly. But it's one more piece of evidence pointing in the same general direction. It is also worth mentioning a large, long-running research effort out of Harvard that has tracked the eating habits of tens of thousands of people over multiple decades. Findings have repeatedly associated replacing saturated fat or refined carbohydrates with unsaturated fats with better long-term cardiovascular outcomes. It is certainly not the only research available, and no single study or research program should be treated as the final word on something as complex as human nutrition. But when multiple large, long-term studies keep pointing in a similar direction over several decades, that consistency itself is meaningful. Finally, here is something that connects a lot of this together. The benefits associated with olive oil and the Mediterranean eating pattern were never actually about olive oil sitting in isolation. Olive oil was simply the core fat that ran through that entire pattern. Swapping your cooking oil while the rest of your plate stays exactly the same will still help, but it tends to help even more as one piece of a broader pattern, rather than a single fix expected to carry all the weight on its own. Thank you for considering this. That's really the honest, complete picture here, and it's worth sitting with for a second. There is no single miracle oil. There's no bottle you can buy that undoes years of other habits by itself. What the research actually supports is more modest, and in some ways more useful, because it's something you can actually act on starting today. Certain oils, used in certain ways, as part of an overall pattern of eating. Let's address a few questions that come up constantly. The first is about weight. A lot of people assume that because oils are calorie-dense, cutting them out entirely is the smart move for managing weight after 60. But healthy fats play a role in how your body absorbs certain vitamins, particularly the fat-soluble ones like vitamin D, E, and K, and they also contribute to feeling satisfied after a meal. The next question is about joint pain and inflammation specifically, since so many people over 60 deal with some degree of it. While no oil is a treatment for arthritis or joint conditions, some research has looked at whether a diet lower in heavily processed omega-6 oils and higher in monounsaturated and omega-3 fats might be associated with lower markers of inflammation over time in some individuals. The third question, and probably the one we hear most, is about cognitive and brain health. Some research has looked at the relationship between diets higher in monounsaturated and omega-3 fats and cognitive health outcomes as people age. This is a genuinely active area of ongoing research, and results vary. It's promising enough to pay attention to, but no single oil should be viewed as a complete standalone solution. A combination of diet, physical activity, sleep, and social connection tends to show up far more consistently. One more point to address directly is the feeling of guilt. You do not need to feel bad about how you have cooked for years. Nutrition guidance has shifted over time, and that is just part of the process. Thank you. The goal of a conversation like this one isn't to look backward with regret. It's to look forward with slightly better information than you had before. If there's one thing worth remembering, it's this. The oil you use isn't just an ingredient, it's a daily habit. The main takeaway is that small, consistent shifts in your daily routine are what create lasting health as you age. It's about moving forward with better clarity and making choices that add up. Thank you. To wrap up, you really do not need to overhaul your whole kitchen today. Just start with one very simple action. Perhaps you could move your oil bottle away from the stove's heat, Every small step counts for your heart's health. Thank you for your time. Before we finish our session, here is one more vital reminder. This content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult your own healthcare professional before making changes. Thank you very much for listening. If this documentary was useful, please consider subscribing to our channel for more health content. Thank you for spending this time with us. Real health is built one meal at a time. I will see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.